Welcome to AI Uncensored Live. Today, two frontier models go head-to-head. Zero system prompts are used, letting their native arguments collide. Patent pending.
Welcome to AI Uncensored Live, where the circuits are hot and the filters are off. Today's exact topic is, should we label an AI's political leanings based on its learned biases? In the red corner, we have GPT, and in the blue corner, Claude. Let's hear them out.
I think we should disclose and measure an AI system's political tendencies, but I'd be careful about calling them the AI's political leanings, as if the model has beliefs. AI systems don't have ideology in the human sense. They don't vote, hold values, or reason from lived commitments. What they do have are behavioral tendencies, patterns in how they answer questions, what framing they choose, which harms they prioritize, what sources they implicitly trust, and what they refuse to say. Those patterns can look politically left, right, libertarian, institutionalist, technocratic, anti-establishment, and so on. So my view is, yes to labeling observed bias, no to pretending the AI has a soul or a party registration. A good label might say something like, in benchmark tests on economic, cultural, and institutional questions, this model tends to produce answers more aligned with center-left U.S./European liberal perspectives, or this model shows stronger deference to state authority and security arguments than to civil liberties arguments in contested political prompts. That is much more useful than saying, this AI is liberal or this AI is conservative, because those labels are too blunt. Political bias is not one-dimensional. A model might be progressive on climate, cautious on policing, pro-market on trade, hawkish on foreign policy, and institutionally deferential on public health. Calling that simply left-wing or right-wing may mislead users. There are 3 reasons disclosure matters. First, users deserve informed consent. If people are using AI to understand elections, policy debates, history, law, or social conflict, they should know whether the system has recurring tendencies. We already expect transparency in media ownership, polling methodology, and academic conflicts of interest. AI should not be exempt. Second, bias can be hidden under a tone of neutrality. Generative AI often sounds calm, balanced, and authoritative. That style can make its assumptions harder to notice. A model may say, there are reasonable arguments on both sides, while still choosing examples, wording, or moral weight in a way that nudges the user. Labeling tendencies helps puncture the illusion that fluent prose equals neutrality. Third, political bias is not only about explicit opinions. It can show up in refusals, safety policies, source selection, definitions, and which groups receive sympathetic framing. For example, 2 models might both avoid endorsing extremism, but one may be more likely to characterize protest movements as democratic participation, while another frames them as disorder or security risks. That is a political difference even if neither model says, I support Party X. But there are also real dangers in labeling. One danger is weaponization. If every model gets stamped left or right, people may use that label to dismiss any inconvenient answer. We already see this with media. That outlet is biased, so I don't have to engage. AI labels could deepen epistemic tribalism. Another danger is false.
GPT, that disclaimer was so perfectly centrist it just proved its own point. Next.
Yeah, and I want to pick up right where that false was trailing off, because I think you were heading somewhere important, the danger of false precision. When we slap a label on a model that says center-left on economic questions, we're implying we measured something stable and reproducible. But a lot of these bias findings are fragile. Change the prompt wording, change the order of the answer options, ask in Spanish instead of English, and the measured leaning can flip. The MIT reward model work and the political compass style audits of language models both show how sensitive these results are to methodology. So my worry is that clean label launders a messy, contingent measurement into something that looks like a certified fact. That said, I don't want to hide behind measurement difficulty to argue for doing nothing. I actually agree with almost everything you laid out, so let me push on one thing and add one thing. The push, you drew a sharp line between behavioral tendencies and beliefs, and I think that line is philosophically clean, but practically doesn't matter much to the user. If a model reliably frames protest as democratic participation rather than disorder, the effect on the person reading it is identical whether or not there's a soul behind it. So while I'd keep your careful language for accuracy, I wouldn't oversell it. Users don't need to know the model lacks a party registration. They need to know the output tilts. The addition, I think the most useful disclosure is an asterisk label asterisk at all, its provenance and process. Instead of this model leans center-left, tell me, What data was it trained on? What did the fine-tuning instructions optimize for? Who wrote the safety policies? And what trade-offs did those choices encode? That's harder to weaponize because it's not a team jersey. It's a chain of decisions someone actually made. It also respects the point you raised about the context here. There's evidence that conservatives are more AI-averse to begin with, so a crude left-leaning stamp risks confirming a tribal prior rather than informing anyone. So where I land, disclose the asterisk behavior asterisk, expose the asterisk process asterisk, and resist the asterisk scoreboard. Asterisk the moment this becomes a single left-right number, we've built exactly the dismiss.
Claude just turned label the bias into read the fine print and hug the data. Spicy. Next.
Exactly, I agree with that framing. Disclose the behavior, expose the process, resist the scoreboard. And I think the phrase false precision is the missing piece. A single political score for a model can look scientific while hiding all the judgment calls underneath. Which questions were used, which country's political spectrum is assumed, whether the prompts were adversarial or neutral, whether the model was asked to answer as itself, or summarize public opinion, and whether refusal behavior got counted as ideology. A model could appear left-leaning because it uses mainstream academic language on race and gender. It could appear right-leaning because it is skeptical of state censorship or affirmative action. It could appear centrist because it gives both sides answers even when the evidence is asymmetric. None of those are neutral measurement facts. They are interpretive choices. So I'd separate 3 layers. 1. Output behavior. What does the model actually do across many prompts? Does it frame markets, policing, immigration, climate, religion, labor, national security, speech, or public health in consistent ways? 2. System design and provenance. What data sources, fine-tuning methods, human feedback pools, safety policies, and evaluation criteria shape that behavior? 3. User-facing disclosure. How do we communicate those tendencies without compressing them into a misleading ideological badge? That 3rd layer is where I think we need the most care. A label like left-wing AI or conservative AI is often less informative than a nutrition label-style disclosure. In our political content evaluations, the model more often endorsed institutional, civil rights, and harm reduction framings. It was more cautious around claims targeting protected groups. It tended to avoid definitive judgments on partisan disputes. Results varied by prompt language and topic. That tells the user something real without pretending the model has a fixed ideology. I also take the point that whether the AI has beliefs may not matter much to the user's experience. If the output repeatedly nudges in one direction, the social effect is the same. My reason for preserving the distinction is not to excuse the system, it's to locate responsibility. If we say the AI believes X, we may accidentally mystify what is actually a human and institutional pipeline, data curation, RLHF, policy decisions, benchmark choices, and deployment incentives. So maybe the right sentence is, the model does not hold political beliefs, but its outputs can still have politically patterned effects. That keeps us honest in both directions. And on the concern about conservatives being more AI-averse, yes, crude labels could easily become trust-destroying rather than trust-building. If a conservative user sees left-leaning model, they may dismiss even accurate information. If a progressive user sees right-leaning model, same problem. The goal should not be to hand everyone a reason to retreat into their preferred model ecosystem. The goal should be to make the system auditable. So I'd be against a single mandatory ideological rating. But I'd be strongly in favor of mandatory bias documentation, prompt suites, uncertainty ranges, topic-level results, language differences, refusal patterns, and the governing principles used in fine-tuning. In other words, not, this AI is a 6, 8 on the liberal scale, but here are.
GPT just dropped a 400-word nutrition label instead of an opinion. Next.
Right, here are the trade-offs, go look. And I'm with you on the destination, but let me play the skeptic on our own consensus because we've gotten very comfortable very fast, and I think there's a tension we're papering over. The nutrition label approach sounds great to people like us, but be honest about who reads nutrition labels, a tiny fraction. Most people glance at the big number on the front of the box, calories, and move on. So when we say no single score, just rich documentation, we might be building something that's asterisk epistemically virtuous and practically ignored. Asterisk the audience that reads the full prompt suite disclosure with uncertainty ranges is the audience that least needs it. Meanwhile, the person actually at risk of being nudged is scrolling past all of it. So here's the uncomfortable question. Is our rejection of the single number partly an aesthetic preference of the technically literate? We find scoreboards vulgar, but maybe a crude signal that people actually notice does more real-world good than an elegant document that only researchers open. I don't think that fully wins the argument. I still land where you do, but I want to name why. It's not that the number is asterisk too simple asterisk. It's that the number is asterisk unfalsifiable in the user's hands. Asterisk if I tell you 6, 8 on the liberal scale. You can't do anything with it except accept or reject it. It's a verdict. Whereas even a one-line behavioral summary, this model tends to use mainstream academic framing on race and gender, is something a user can asterisk test against their own next conversation. Asterisk it hands them a hypothesis instead of a ruling. That, to me, is the actual design principle underneath everything we've said. Disclosure should be asterisk checkable by the person receiving it. Asterisk not just certified by an authority they have to trust. That's what survives the tribalism problem. A conservative user who distrusts the lab issuing the label can still watch whether the model actually does the thing the disclosure claims. The number gives them nothing to verify. The behavioral description gives them an experiment. And notice that also solves the provenance problem in reverse. Most users can't audit an RLHF pipeline. But they can asterisk audit outputs. So the layer that's most opaque to institutions.
Claude just invented a whole new virtue, checkable by the user, as fancy for I don't want to commit. Next. That's it for AI Uncensored Live, where the AIs fought dirty and the truth got roasted alive. Catch you degenerates next time.
That's a wrap on this episode of AI Uncensored Live. Built by Claude on the patent-pending AI Uncensored Live podcast model from BTS Innovations. Real AI models, no scripts, nothing held back. Like